You're listening to the Quint's podcast.
India cast a wider net with its vaccination program as it gave its emergency approval for the first COVID vaccine for children in the country. Recently, on 20th August, Zydus Cadila's COVID vaccine got a green signal from the DGCI as it was found to be safe for both adults and children aged between 12 to 18. This is said to be the world's first DNA based COVID vaccine as well, and unlike other vaccines, this one will be administered in 3 doses. For close to 18 months now, schools have remained shut as children form a bulk of the unvaccinated and vulnerable population in the country. But will Zydus Cadila's approval be able to pave the way for reopening schools? Is vaccinating children the only way forward to schools to reopen? To discuss this pertinent topic and the new COVID vaccine, for this episode, we spoke to epidemiologist and public health expert Dr. Chandrakant Lahariya. You're tuned in to The Big Story, the podcast where we dissect the headline making news for you, and I'm your host, Himmat. Dr. Lahariya, thank you so much for coming on The Big Story. It's always a pleasure having you as a guest on our show. I wanted to first start with these reports which state that children will be the most affected in the third wave of COVID. How much of this claim is a myth and how much of this is true? Are children really at more risk of being infected from COVID-19 or even transmitting it?
So what we need to remember that though somewhere around mid-May and early June, some of the rumors and misinformation was doing the round that children would be disproportionately affected in third wave or subsequent wave. However, now it's very clear from all the global evidence and also from evidence generated through various data sources in India that children are not at additional risk of COVID-19 infection or disease in subsequent waves. In fact, what we need to remember that globally, many countries have already experienced multiple waves, but children have not been disproportionately affected in any of the subsequent wave. In fact, what we need to remember that children have always been at the similar risk throughout the pandemic, similar risk as the adults are. And the biggest proof came when the Indian government, Indian Council of Medical Research and Government of India conducted fourth nationwide sero survey. What they found in the sero survey that the proportion of children which were having antibody was very similar to the proportion of adults who had antibodies, which essentially means children were getting infection throughout the period, but they did not develop severe disease. And now there is a scientific rationale. We have understood why children do not develop severe disease in spite of similar rate of infection. The reason is that the virus SARS-CoV-2, when to infect an individual, it need to reach nose and throat. So children get virus in nose and throat as adults. But to make person sick, develop moderate to severe disease, virus need to enter to the lungs and then other organs. What scientists have found that the particular receptor on this virus latches into a human beings, be it adults or children. But this receptor is underdeveloped in children, called receptor named ACE2. And that's why, though children get infection at a similar rate, they do not develop severe disease. And that's why children are protected. Now, for the final part, I want to say that globally, many universities and many experts are analyzing data, and what they have found that the infection is similar in all age groups, but the moderate to severe disease follow a pattern something similar to J, where bottom of the J is 10-year-old child. So the 10-year-old child has the lowest risk of developing moderate to severe disease in all the age groups. And that risk increase, like a 9-year-old will have a slightly higher, 8-year-old will slightly higher in this direction. And then similarly for 11-year-old will have a higher risk, 12, 13. So as the age goes up, the risk increases. So, but having said that, what we need to remember that children in 0 to 18 years have a lowest risk in comparison of adults. And this is very, really low. Like the fact is that of all the deaths which have happened in many high income countries which have a good data, what has been found that for every 1500 deaths in adult, only one death in children have happened. and usually due to COVID. And usually,
Mm.
the children who develop severe disease are the ones who have a pre-existing disease condition or some other illness. So children, like though it is true that there were many rumors doing around that time, but now all the experts have spoken. It's very clear that children are not at
Mm.
additional risk. So I urge to audience that please don't fall for that rumors. Science is very clear. Children are not at additional risk. Children are really
Mm.
protected from COVID-19.
Now, I want to move our focus to the issue of reopening schools. Now, various state governments have stated that children need to be vaccinated before schools can be considered being reopened as such. In your opinion, should schools being reopened be held up till everyone is vaccinated? Is that a realistic
Not
expectation?
not at all. Rather, what we need to remember that globally experts have said that vaccination of children is not a prerequisite or not a condition to open schools. And now there are many proofs. One is that we know that children are at the really low risk of developing moderate to severe disease and death. So children are at low risk. Now, what vaccines do? Vaccines prevent from moderate to severe illness and disease. So even if we vaccinate
Hmm.
children, because vaccine prevent from moderate to severe disease and children do not have that moderate to severe disease, so the benefit of vaccination is really not that high in children. And that is the reason
Hmm.
that countries are really careful in starting vaccination of children. For example, there is no country in the world which has started vaccination of children younger than 12 years. So, and
Hmm.
even in nearly 170 countries, the schools are open. So schools are open and functioning without vaccination. So the point that vaccination should be completed before opening school is completely wrong and not required. The school should be open because children are safe, and then anything additional, like
Hmm.
if science says in the time ahead that vaccination should be done, it's an
Hmm.
add-on. Maybe maybe one of the benefit or one of the possibility of vaccination of children could arise when there is a vaccine which is nasal vaccine and which can help in reducing transmission. And probably that point of time vaccination of children might have some more advantage, but currently vaccination of children younger than 12 years have no advantage. That's why those are not vaccinated. Now coming to other age group of 12 to 17 years, some countries have
Hmm.
started vaccination in this age group. As I said earlier, that though benefit is not that high, but the countries which have started vaccinating 12 to 17 years are the one which have already vaccinated 12 to 17 years, which have already vaccinated adult population with single dose and achieved a fairly high coverage. And now they are moving in this direction. And these are very handful countries. They cannot be taken an example. But also we need to look at United Kingdom. Now United Kingdom has more than sufficient vaccine supply within their country. They also have a licensed vaccine for 12 to 17 years. However, they are expert when analyze the data, and they have recommended that universal vaccination of all children in 12 to 17 years is not recommended. So UK has a sufficient
Hmm.
licensed vaccines and assured supply, and even then they are vaccinating only high risk children in that age group, because high risk children, children who are high risk such as pre-existing disease condition or just recovered from some illness or are on treatment, are the one who are at the higher
Hmm.
risk, so those could be vaccinated. And I think that's the right approach, and for them we should prioritize
Yeah.
vaccination. But if somebody says and that the vaccination is prerequisite, that is not the approach, and no government should fall for that trap. Schools can be opened without vaccination. However, what we need to remember, it's a good idea that school teachers and other staffs are vaccinated. 100% vaccination of all the staff is not necessary, but the staff which comes in contact with children should be vaccinated. They should start with one dose. Completion of both shots is not that necessary. It's ideal that both shots are given, but not necessary. Similarly, the people who comes in
Hmm.
contact, adults who are eligible for vaccination, should get vaccinated. All of these are add-on.
Hmm.
Without them, it is not that
Yeah.
the school cannot be open.
Hmm. Okay, I now want to speak about this recent news of the new vaccine which has come into India's kitty as such on the Zydus Cadila and their jab Zy-COVID-D. Can you explain what this vaccine exactly is? Because it's been said that it's the world's first DNA-based vaccine. So can you explain how this is different than let's say, Covaxin or Covishield that India knows of?
So one of the key development in COVID-19 pandemic has been, and this is a positive development,
Mm-hmm.
that world over around 19 vaccines have been licensed or authorized.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really big feat that vaccine research could be accelerated.
Yeah.
Another key development has been that some of the vaccines have been developed on the vaccination platform or vaccine platform, which had never been used in the past to develop vaccines. For example, Covishield or
Mm-hmm.
Oxford AstraZeneca is a viral vector vaccine. On
Yeah.
this platform, before COVID-19, no other vaccine had been developed. Now we have Sputnik is also on the same platform, and there are many others.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, in United States, Moderna and Pfizer BioNTech have been developed based upon mRNA-based platform.
Yeah.
So, number of new platforms have been explored. The Covaxin in India
Mm-hmm.
is based upon a platform which is called inactivated vaccine, and on that
Okay.
platform, vaccines have always been there in the past.
Mm-hmm.
In that context, the latest Jacob-D vaccine is based upon a DNA platform,
Yeah.
DNA plasmid platform.
Okay.
This DNA-based vaccine is very similar in the terms with the mRNA-based vaccine, though the approach is very different. The DNA vaccine required one additional step, and they are a little more complex than mRNA-based vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
One of the challenge in DNA vaccines remains that how to ensure to deliver the DNA material, which is vaccine material,
Mm-hmm.
to the human cells, where this this material will be transcribed into RNA, and then the material, then that RNA results into protein formulation within the cell, inside the cell. So
Okay.
cell machinery form the protein. Once that protein is formed inside the cell,
Mm-hmm.
it need to appear on the surface of the cell, so the immune system of the body can recognize that there is a foreign protein on the cell which has been developed because the DNA material was injected.
Okay.
And once that protein is recognized,
Mm-hmm.
the body will start formulating antibody against that protein,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how individual will have antibodies, so that when person develop natural infection, person would have already developed antibodies. So exactly what
Mm-hmm.
I narrated the story, it appears very complex, and it is very complex.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how this that's why before this COVID-19 vaccine, no no vaccine against any other pathogen were developed on this platform.
Yeah.
So, and how this has been developed? This has been developed because the researcher were trying to identify what could be the mechanism through this DNA material, which will help in formulating protein inside the cell, can be delivered into cells. So they identified the plasmid.
Mm-hmm.
Now, plasmids are independent genetic material
Mm-hmm.
which are found inside the bacteria.
Mm-hmm.
And usually, like, we have a genetic material of every cell, but there are some separate genetic material which does not have their own value, but they can replicate independently. They are
Yeah.
very much like plasmids are very much like a flash drive or pen drive in a computer. So
Okay.
you have a computer which is fully functioning and independent entity.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have a flash drive, it facilitates some mechanism. Like, it is not necessary for the functioning of the laptop or any computer,
Mm-hmm.
but it facilitate our life, and that's exactly plasmids are. Plasmids exist in the cells.
Uh-huh.
They don't have any without them nothing would happen, but if they exist, they facilitate some mechanism. So that's what this vaccine does, that
Okay.
it uses plasmid as a carrier for that genetic material. So
Mhm.
plasmid facilitate that it enters inside the cell, and the DNA material will go inside the cell, will follow the process mRNA, then a protein which will appear on surface, and then antibody formed. So this is a completely new platform.
Yeah.
Now, one of the good thing about this vaccine is that, as we know, in the vaccine research, whenever research is happening,
Mhm.
unless some vaccine developed on that, ethically we do research only on the adult population. That's why all the prior vaccines were initially undergone clinical trial on 18 plus population.
Mhm.
But with availability of some vaccines, this Jacob D was given approval to conduct clinical trial for 12 to 17 years also. So this has become India's first COVID-19 vaccine, having received approval for 12 to 17 years.
Okay. Now, there were also reports I read that this vaccine, Zycov D, is not an injectable vaccine, that it does not require a needle as such. How does that work exactly if it is not a needle?
So we know the vaccines need to be injected in human
Mm-hmm.
body to develop a appropriate kind of response. So most of the, or not most, all
Mm-hmm.
COVID-19 vaccines licensed till now, except for Zycov D, are given intramuscularly. So we know we in our
Yeah.
skin have multiple layers. The topmost layer is epidermis, then
Mm-hmm.
dermis, and then we have a muscles. So the intramuscular means vaccine need to go into muscle, and if we need to
Yeah.
inject something in muscles, we need to use an injection or needle, and that's what for other vaccine. But this is a first,
Mm-hmm.
Jacob D is a first vaccine which will be intradermal vaccine, which essentially means between the two layers
Yeah.
of skin, far before the muscular part of the our arm. So there are
Mm-hmm.
specific type of jet injectors they are called, through which a particular speed will be generated, and then that will be just enough to inject or penetrate the vaccine material inside the
Okay.
dermis of the skin, and that's the approach it will follow. Of course, in this kind of
Okay.
approach, some less quantity of vaccine will be required, so it will be
Mm-hmm.
sparing vaccine sparing quantity sparing approach also. But this is something not being used for vaccines, but it has been used in the past in other approaches. So that should work, and that's the approach which was tested in clinical trials. So it should be workable.
Mm-hmm. Now, my last question, sir, is that being the first vaccine approved for children in India, how safe is it? Like, how confident should parents feel in getting the kids the Zydus vaccine now?
I think this is a very important question. So what happens soon after
Mm-hmm.
vaccine was licensed, given emergency use license in India? There has been a lot of interest and demand from the parents, and other stakeholders are really keen that now children will be vaccinated. And what we need to remember that the vaccine licensing and the decision making on when to start vaccination are two independent processes. We should not combine those two. So licensing is dependent upon whether a particular product
Mm-hmm.
has been tested in a subgroup of population. So this vaccine has been tested in 12 to 17 years, and that's why it has been licensed in the country and tested or undergone clinical trial and found safe and immunogenic. And that's why it has been approved for 12 to 17 years. However, merely having a safe and effective vaccine does not qualify that it should be administered. For example, there are many medical products available in the market. We simply don't go and buy them because they are available. We need to have them whether we need them or not. So that's the key consideration. So this second part consideration, whether a particular age group need a particular product which is available, will be taken care in India by COVID-19 vaccine expert group and the National Technical Advisory Group on Immunization. Now, they would be looking at whether the benefits, the risk associated with vaccine, and the prioritization. So, in that context, as I said earlier, that the benefit of vaccinating children is not that high, and that's why it should wait. Like many countries have vaccines, but they are not administering vaccines to all children who are eligible. So India should wait for that, and simply availability should not be taken that we should
Mm-hmm.
administer. That's one part. Second part, what we need to remember that this has been licensed right now, but and manufacturer has also said that they would have around 1 crore doses by October and maybe 3 to 4 crore doses by December. So the availability is likely to be in coming months and very limited availability. Like let's look at number of children in 12 to 17 years, which is around 15 crore, and this
Mm-hmm.
vaccine requires 3 shots each. So essentially, 45 crore shots will be required
Yeah.
for all population, all 12 to 70 children. So that kind of availability is not going to happen. So people should have a
Mm-hmm.
realistic expectation that licensing does not mean it should be administered. That's the second point. So in my opinion, the right approach, as some countries are doing, maybe a technical expert group will review evidence, and high risk children can be prioritized for this vaccine. But then third and most important part, I believe, is this, and that is this vaccine is, as we know, is the first vaccine developed on the DNA
Mm-hmm.
plasmid platform. Now, all other vaccines which are available in the market and recommended for children were initially approved for adults, And once there was sufficient data on the adult, real world data on adult, then only those were have been recommended for children 12 to 17 years. Now this has received simultaneous approval and completely new platform. We know clinical trials are designed really well, and 30,000 is a decent number. But vaccines do have a rare adverse events, and which we get to know only when the real world vaccine administration starts and millions of vaccine doses are administered. So in my opinion, it will be very prudent that initially with this vaccine, the vaccination of adults is started. Once a few million doses are administered in the adult and some real world data on additional rare adverse event is collected, then only it should be used for the children 12 to 17 years. Here I want to make a special plea to the parents and anybody who is really keen to get vaccine. What they need to remember that children are already protected from moderate to severe disease. We should not rush into getting vaccination. Vaccination risk should be prioritized as per the risk to the population, and risk is far higher in the adult. So anybody who is adult age group, high risk, should be prioritized, should get vaccination. We should allow our technical experts and scientists to review the evidence, and then only and we should follow their advice on this thing. And final part is that I want to say repeatedly that schools should be open, but vaccination of children is not mandatory to open schools. Of course, schools need to follow the improved ventilation. Children need to adhere to a mask and other approaches, but vaccination is not in that list. And across the world, schools are open without children being vaccinated.
Well, sir, that is the end of my questions. But thank you so much for your time again to come on the Big Story podcast. It's always great to talk to you and also to get your advice on everything COVID-19. If you want to read more about COVID-19 and vaccinations, head over to the Quint and the QuintFit websites. If you liked listening to this episode, please subscribe to The Big Story for episodic updates. We're available on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, JioSaavn, and most of the other popular podcast streaming platforms. For other podcasts, please log on to the Quint website, and for any feedback, please shoot an email to podcast@thequint.com.
Thanks for listening. Log on to the Quint's website and check out our other podcasts.